Esteban Ocon is a bad teammate. True or false? Put that statement out into the world and it won't get that much pushback. From his junior scraps with Verstappen, his Force India days with Checo, or his Alpine time with Fernando, Esteban has cultivated a reputation for being a bit of a problematic teammate. Well, today I wanted to challenge this assertion by asking him. Not myself exactly, this video has been made in collaboration with the High Performance Podcast, host Jake Humphrey, Professor Damien, who sat down with Esteban earlier this year, and I requested they put to him this exact point. Not to mention that Esteban revealed exclusively that he had not one, but 2 seat opportunities for 2019, didn't end up getting either. Damn, my name's Tommo. Let's talk about it. Now, to any of you who've watched my stuff for a while, you might remember a deep dive video I did on Esteban Ocon almost exactly 3 years ago to this day. How his family sold up their home, the mechanics underneath their home, and travelled all over Europe in a caravan for 5 years to go all in supporting Esteban's karting career. This High Performance Podcast goes into all the details about that. It's over an hour-long podcast with early exclusivity to the High Performance app, so link in the description down below if you want to download that and give it a listen after you're done with this video. I said it then and I'll say it now. To be cognizant in any way of that sheer sacrifice that your parents are having to go through to give you the opportunity, not even the guarantee, the opportunity to race, that must shape the driver you become. Sacrifice.
Yeah, different life than most kids. I never went to ski on holidays, for example. I never really went to birthday party of other kids. We were rarely going on holidays or weekends, with my parents. It was all about going onto the racetrack, training. I had a lot of weight on my shoulder very young. With the amount of sacrifice that my parent puts, I had no rights to fail. Basically, I had to succeed, otherwise we were going to be in big trouble.
Because on top of all that pressure to succeed, Esteban was also kind of fighting with one hand behind his back.
So when we were doing the national championships, some kids, had the luxury to be able to be in race teams or in factory teams, all of that, to be in the big, tents and have, mechanics, a lot of different engines and all of that. I had one used chassis, 2 used engine that we chose carefully. And we were recycling tires at testing, going to the bin, taking some tires from other kids that were still warm but still in very good condition, putting them on testing. So
I think it's quite easy to picture the scene, no? You've got Esteban, his dad, his mum, that's it. All these other teams with motorhomes and multiple staff members, new engines, new chassis, every race. You'd almost feel out of place, yet you still find a way to win. The story was very similar with Lewis Hamilton's early career. Just look at Esteban's karting record, it's pretty decent, and he was fortunate to have parents willing to make those sacrifices, because a lot wouldn't be prepared to take that risk.
It's nuts. If I was in their position now, I would probably not be doing that, taking that much risk,
I'm very sure many of the kids around him at the time participating wanted it, right? Wanted to be successful, wanted to make it as an F1 driver. That's the dream, okay? But it feels like Esteban and the Ocons, like he needed it. They've burnt all their money supporting his career. They've sold their family home, family business. Like, what then? Failure was not an option by this stage. Making it in some way, shape or form was not any longer a choice. And to have that kind of desperation so drilled into you, I guess, at such an early age, that's going to impact the way you go racing. That's going to impact the gaps that you go for, how aggressive you are, and the gaps you don't. The Verstappening. Now, you can't talk about Esteban Ocon in junior motorsport and not also talk about Max Verstappen, because they locked heads many a time, both in karts and single-seaters, with the outcome clearly leaving a lasting impression on the driver that Esteban has now become.
I know a lot of people will talk about the fact that the first time you came across Max Verstappen, who's the big rival in Formula One, was when you were racing together in the junior categories.
And in go-kart, it was those years, when we were with my dad against, him and his dad. Everybody was a little bit scared, of Jos and Max at the time, because Jos was driving Formula 1 before.
And who blamed them, right, for being intimidated by that? Even the kids with the big motorhomes and the big budgets, when you've got an ex-F1 driver there, an ex-F1 driver with the reputation of Jos Verstappen, with his son doing bits, that's going to intimidate anyone. But once again, to Esteban, fear's not really an option because it's all or nothing. But even Max didn't have that same level of desperation and that need. Okay, that need came from him personally. If Max had decided, you know what, I'm all right now, I don't fancy doing this anymore, they could have cracked on and had a happy life, right? Jos, made a decent enough wage, I'm sure, for himself when he was an F1 driver. If Esteban had done the same, well, he couldn't have done the same. That wasn't an option because his family had sacrificed literally everything to put him in that position.
My dad and myself, we were never scared because we just wanted to race, we wanted to race hard, and we've raced hard. We've raced really hard, and at times we crossed lines, All of that, made me learn a lot on how to race, and I hope, it made him learn, a good amount as well.
Because yes, we're talking about Esteban Ocon's reputation as a bad teammate here, but then you look at Max's career as well, his early career, and the aggressiveness with which he races, particularly obviously we saw that in 2021, but he's always had this reputation, the Verstappen era early doors, right? He had many a ding-dong with many a driver. What was it? Vettel, when him and Vettel locked horns, wasn't it, in like 2017 or something, when Max was really young and Max called him childish, which is quite funny. Like, Max drives aggressively, Esteban drives aggressively, and I think part of the reason they do is because of each other, because Max has this obsessive dedication to the craft. Ocon had, it was that or nothing. So you bring that together, two drivers who are going to leave nothing on the table and never going to back out of a move, because for them it's all or nothing. It's created a monster in each other, I guess. It's not fair. So we talked about Max's impact on Esteban on track, but also off track. Roll ahead to single seaters, Euro Formula 3 2014. This was the time that Ocon must have started to realise that performance on track was not enough. You need more than that.
And then we've met again in Formula 3 later, from go-kart in 2011, 3 years break, and then we met in Formula 3 racing for the title as well, and there it was hard racing as well. So
when you raced for the title in Formula 3 together, who won it?
I did, yeah, I did.
But the following season after that, he moved to F1, right?
Yes, yeah.
And you didn't?
No.
Indeed, that season did end with a 17-year-old going on 18-year-old Esteban winning the championship, a solid 67 points ahead of a 16 going on 17-year-old Max Verstappen. And this field had a bunch of names you'll probably recognise. Tom Blomqvist also beat Max, he finished P2 in the end. Antonio Giovinazzi, Felix Rosenqvist, Jake Dennis, and most importantly, Nicholas Latifi, legend. Max actually took 10 years that year, one more than Esteban, but Ocon's consistency was phenomenal. Okay, Ocon got 9 wins, he also got 9 P2s. Max only got 3 P2s. But again, put yourself in Esteban's shoes for a minute, okay? You've just won this championship. You've grafted more than most of your contemporaries to get into that position. You've risked and sacrificed more. You've gone and won it, yet the guy who finished third is getting an F1 seat, and you not only have won Euro Formula 3 and are not getting an F1 seat, which, alright, there's no entitlement to an F1 seat for winning Euro Formula 3, but all of a sudden, actually, you could be completely out of a drive in any way, shape or form for 2015.
It's things that were out of our control, let's say, and that's the moment where I was actually about to go work with my dad as a mechanic. The program I was in, which was called Lotus F1 Team Junior and Gravity Sport Management, had no money for me to continue. In this transition from 2014 to 2015, I was on the phone constantly calling Toto, asking him, if there was any solutions for me, or because I've met him during that year, because I won with a Mercedes engine in Formula 3. And I was very pissed off in those times.
And how did you deal with that?
Yeah, that was difficult. That was very, very difficult, because to me it was not fair. Not saying that I would go to F1, because I always believed that my time would come. But in those moments, I wasn't sure that I was going to even continue racing. And for me, that wasn't fair.
He's put all this in, and all of a sudden, budget's dried up, and it's clearly not enough to be performing at a high level. Look, Esteban's made it, right? He's in Formula 1 now. He's been an established Formula 1 driver for years, but there must be so many stories of young drivers that we just never get to hear of. Esteban was able to get together a budget in a big help thanks to Gwen Legrue, Toto Wolff and Fred Vasseur as well. Toto Wolff and Gwen still kind of do his management at the moment, which is mad. Esteban was in GP3 in 2015 and won that as well, which kind of forced, you know, the hand of an F1 team to pick him up for 2016. Of course, Manor came along and the rest is history. Well, I'll say that, it wasn't quite that simple, was it? Not to mention when Esteban was in a Manor in 2016, Max was literally in the Red Bull by then, by Spain anyway. That must have stung for him, I'm not gonna lie. I beat this guy not even 2 years ago in Euro Formula 3. Now I'm in a Manor and he's in a Red Bull. What it means to be a teammate. See, asking Esteban straight up if he's a bad teammate, if he thinks he's a bad teammate, is a bit on the nose, okay? I think Jake worded it much better than I possibly could have. Take it away.
A lot of people talk about the fact that Michael Schumacher used to create challenge and create obstacles and create friction because he knew it would make him perform better.
Yeah.
And I've sort of watched your career unfold, whether it is the time that you clashed and then he pushed you after the race, stuff going on with Checo, even your current teammate when you both got paired together, all the papers were writing, oh, everyone knows they don't get on with each other and all this sort of stuff. So I wonder whether you've had to do that to get the best out of yourself, whether you've gone looking for a battle rather than looking for friendship.
And actually, this Schumacher approach is an interesting point that Jake makes, okay? And not for one, we're not comparing Schumacher and Ocon in terms of talent, right? Of course, Schumacher's one of the greatest to ever do it. But if we're looking at this mindset, there are similarities, I think. And perhaps it was that pushing for friction that resulted in, you know, his glory years having Barrichello alongside, who was it's written into his contract that he was the second driver. If you'd have had a driver who had any ambition to take that number one, Schumacher would have nipped that in the bud straight away. In fact, Rubens spoke on Beyond the Grid talking about his teammateship with Michael. Very interesting quotes here. I've always made friends and I've always had a good relationship with all my teammates, but Michael, was never supportive. He was never there to offer help, so I never asked. Michael was different. He was a bit naive in the way he worked. So many times we would finish a meeting and they would start another one with just Michael there, so I took my chair and would just sit there. Eventually, I felt that the team was his. That's crazy. Like, I can't imagine a team getting away with that in this day and age. Like, we say it's one-sided with Max, but I don't think it's anywhere near as clearly and obviously one-sided as it was with Michael and Ferrari and Barrichello back in, early 2000s. But anyway, that's how Jake asked the question, and here's how Esteban answered it.
No, I think that's not necessarily the right way, to say it. I think the challenge, it comes from more, not knowing and uncertain about the future always.
Yeah.
That's what I've been growing with, basically my whole time. And it's always been, that's it, I'm gonna have to fight, for that. And not being settled has been a strength of mine in being able to perform, at a better level always.
Yeah.
So I don't fear that a lot of driver would fear, always these issues. And for sure, the teammate things and the fights with Max, we've never been able to be fighting on the same league, let's say, in Formula 1, because Max had a winning car and I had a midfield car. So you always want to beat everyone that you race against. You need to work well with your teammate, for the team to be able to get the car to a better place. But on track, yeah, you need to finish in front of anyone that you can. Doesn't matter if it's your teammate or someone else that you are fighting with, you need to finish in front.
I think that is an interesting and important distinction that Esteban makes. To him, being a team player in an F1 team is more about working on the back end, making sure you're both developing the car in the right direction, playing that game behind the scenes. But as soon as the helmet goes on and the visor goes down, the gloves are off. And these drivers have been doing it since they were 8, if not younger. You're gonna drive instinctively, and the way that Esteban has learned to drive is that you fight with everyone. It doesn't matter if they're your teammate or you don't make that distinction. I think that explains a lot of the tension he's had between teammates. Not that it's always been his fault, by the way, especially when it was him and Checo. I think Checo had just as much, if not more, to play in their on-track, collisions. But, the way he would defend against Fernando when they were teammates at Alpine more recently was the most kind of egregious example of Esteban just being like, nah, I ain't giving you this position, right? You're going to have to fight me for it, even though you're my teammate. It's a fine line, and that's motorsport, and everyone's in it for themselves, ultimately, first and foremost. It's not fair, again. It may have felt harsh, right, for Esteban in, end of 2014, seeing Max get called up to F1 and he's pretty much out the seat. But at the end of the day, Max's example was the exception, not the rule. But then wind the clock forward to the end of 2018 and he had every right to feel hard done by. Absolutely. Because after 2 pretty impressive seasons at what was then Force India, which has now become Aston Martin, the Stroll takeover had come in, he'd rebranded the team to Racing Point, and his Lance was taking a seat, and Checo wasn't losing his. Esteban was out. And as we know, he wasn't able to get a seat for 2019. But this is really interesting.
I'm not going to say the whole story there, but we had 2 contracts on the table and 2 options, and we knew I was not going to stay at Force India. That was very clear at the time. But one was signed, so I just had to sign it. I was going to race for the team in 2019. But yeah, we decided to not go to this one and go to the other. And it didn't work out with the other. It was for a misunderstanding between parties and things that I was not in control of. And that again goes to the point where it's not fair, because it's not on performance, it's not on merit. If I had a bad season, the performance wasn't there, I would have understand, for me to be on the sideline. But
and you end up with no drive at all.
Exactly. yeah, that wasn't really well executed.
When was the moment that you realised there was going to be no drive for that year?
Well, I found out it was not going to happen, by the end of 2018. It was clear that everybody was signed and that was it, And then turning up at the first race and speaking to Mercedes of, when was I going to be testing the car? And they said, oh yeah, you are going to test in 3 or 4 months. Then I came back in the car back then and I cried in the parking lot, I remember. And yeah, luckily we found a solution to come back again. But
to my knowledge, this is the first time we've ever seen Esteban publicly acknowledge that he had not 1, but 2 offers for seats in 2019, yet ended up with neither. I mean, that's tough for anyone, but again, the sacrifice, the risk that was taken at such an early stage, put it all behind your son's career, get him through karting, get into junior formulas, then see Max get the promotion, potentially be out of the seat, have to, be on the phone to Toto every day to get a GP3 seat. Finally get to F1, have 2 really strong seasons, I felt anyway. To lose that and see drivers on the grid that, clearly don't merit that as much as you do, that's character defining, that is. Who were those 2 teams? Because Esteban doesn't want to say, right? And fair enough, okay? But we can certainly speculate. We can look at teams who, going from 2018 to 2019, changed their driver lineup somewhat and look at where Esteban could have slotted in and where he merited a seat more than at least one of those drivers, 2 of those drivers. Let me know the teams you think in the comments down below, although I've got a pretty good idea. I reckon I've got the 2. My first thought goes to Sauber. So 2018 they had Leclerc, Ericsson. Obviously Leclerc went to Ferrari. Kimi took Leclerc's seat, so they essentially did a swap there. Ericsson left the sport entirely, went over to IndyCar, had his first season in IndyCar in 2019, and it's been a pretty successful career for him over there. Kimi, fair enough. I think, doing the swap, Kimi and Charles, that was a pretty good decision for Sauber at the time, even though I think, Kimi definitely took his foot off the gas, for want of a better term. It's Ericsson's replacement, Antonio Giovinazzi, who the year prior, in 2018, was F1 test reserve driver, same in 2017 as well. For him to get that seat over Ocon doesn't feel like a merit. I mean, it wasn't. There's no way that's a merit hire. That is for sure he's Italian, he's Ferrari young driver. Ferrari at that time have a super close relationship with Sauber, less so now, of course, with Audi about to take that over. I think one of those seats was probably going to be alongside Kimi Räikkönen at Sauber, but Giovinazzi got it instead. The other seat, for me, I think probably Williams. Now, again, in 2018, they had Stroll and Sorokin. Obviously, Stroll was moving to take Esteban's seat. He's the reason that Esteban was out of a seat, okay, because Daddy Stroll bought Force India. In his place came George Russell. Obviously, young Mercedes Jr. had just wiped the field. Formula 2 beat Norris and Albon to do it quite convincingly in the end. Alongside him, obviously, Sorokin lost his seat at the end of 2018. I'd love to have seen more of Sorokin. Arguably was better than Stroll. I think he out-qualified Stroll that year. Don't quote me on that. And in his place, Robert Kubica. Now, of course, prime Robert Kubica, that's one of modern F1's most what could have been stories, because he was lined up for a Ferrari drive, wasn't he? 2010, I think it was, around Suzuka. What an unreal lap, and what could have been, but obviously he had that horrific rally accident in 2011. And when he returned, you know, of course it's fair to say he was never the driver that he once was, and just for him to get back into Formula 1's a huge story. But the reason I think that seat, his seat, was probably going to be Esteban's originally, you look at Kubica, and we didn't know the levels he was going to be, but also you look at the sponsor backing and the Orlen backing, Polish big oil company, right? Williams, where they were at that time as well, 2018 going into 2019. 2019 was their worst season, arguably ever. They barely make the test. They had that rocket livery on, which has confused me as a sponsor. Don't fully trust them. They almost had Rich Energy as a sponsor as well. There's the leaked image of the Rich Energy logo on the side of that car, because they did entertain it. They didn't take the bait in the end, but they did entertain it. I feel like they needed the money at Williams, and the idea of Kubica coming in and maybe being close to his prime, but also the money that he brought along. Whereas Esteban, you know, he doesn't bring sponsor backing. If they hadn't have hired Kubica and bought in Orlen as a sponsor in 2019, you can certainly argue the team might not be here today. Look, I've been accused of bias towards Esteban many a time by many a person, and you know what? Maybe that is somewhat true. But do you want to know why? I acknowledge this story and the struggle and the risk and the sacrifice that him and his family had to go through. The overwhelming majority of other drivers on the grid did not have to go through to get to where he is. And you look at why he is the aggressive teammate, the aggressive driver that he is. And yes, he does overstep the mark sometimes. He crosses those boundaries, right? Whether it was in his karting days or whether it's in Formula 1. But I get it. I mean, even now, Esteban doesn't have the brand of a Lando or a Charles, even his teammate, a Pierre. That's why I think, you know, long term, if one of them is to go, it will probably be Esteban, because I think Alpine look at Gasly as a more appealing brand. I think their skills are very matched on track, but Pierre's got Esteban completely licked off track. Like, if his performances wane, there's very little else to keep him in. It's kind of ironic that one of his best mates in the paddock is Lance Stroll, and you know, him and Esteban couldn't be at more opposite ends of the job security spectrum in Formula 1, right? When you take performance out of it, because of course Ocon's a better driver than Stroll, but if you look at everything off track, Stroll is as secure as it can get. Ocon's about as unsecure as you can get. I have to beat everyone. I have to race wheel to wheel. I have to. That mindset is so drilled in, because otherwise he's, you know, going to be back working as a mechanic with his dad. And isn't that the kind of attitude we actually want to see as fans of these drivers in Formula 1? I'd say so. Shout out once again to the High Performance Podcast for allowing me to use this footage and working with me on this video. Give the full thing a listen. There's loads I missed out from this. I just wanted to kind of take the sections that I felt could make a really interesting video telling the tale of why Esteban is the driver he is. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.